How did Daniel Lynch have his turnaround in the final month of the season? We'll dive into it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and some producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And you can find this episode and all of our episodes on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. I thought this would be another good time to look back at the season and not quite do what we decided to accomplish on our episode yesterday, which was give out a grade for Maikel Garcia. And if you missed that show, you can always go back and find it on wherever you do get your podcast. So I thought today, though, we could kind of take that approach of reviewing a player's season, but more specifically, review a player's season basically in 1 month. I could sit here and evaluate every single outing for Daniel Lynch. And we will be looking back to some of his outings that he had in 2024, but really focusing in on what he was able to do in the final month of the season, which was become, arguably, next to Lucas Erceg, the Royals' second best pitcher in the bullpen. You know, at times even better than Chris Bubic because of the length he could go, how efficient he was, how he raided the zone, as the Royals like to call it. September, Daniel Lynch was the best version of Daniel Lynch that we have ever seen. And I thought today, as I was at work and I was doing some digging for this podcast and going over numbers, that I would look at how Daniel Lynch was able to improve and improve so drastically, going from a guy that maybe a lot of Royals fans didn't want to see back up in Kansas City. I certainly had that vibe after his outing against the Yankees back in June. You know, he had come on after Dan Altavilla was the opener, and he gave up a 3-run home run to Stanton. He had been just hit around pretty hard. He thought that he'd pitched well enough and that he was one bad pitch from a pretty good outing, which I can't completely rule out. I mean, the stat line would have looked a lot better if it wasn't for that mistake. But it was a mistake, and his ERA wasn't good. He still wasn't striking anybody out, and that was the biggest letdown because coming out of the draft, I thought that Daniel Lynch in that 2018 class had the highest upside because of his arm slot, because he was a lefty that could run it anywhere from mid-90s to upper 90s, but he just couldn't stay healthy down at the minor league level. Then he had his chance, of course, in 2021, had his chance in 2022, had his chance in 2023, just never really caught on. So in 2024, my expectations just weren't really there anymore for Daniel Lynch. I didn't think he would be a starter in the rotation, at least long-term, and I wasn't too high on the idea of him being a bullpen arm because I didn't see his stuff playing that well in the bullpen. But when I looked at these numbers, I was able to determine that 2023 Daniel Lynch, and for the most part, early version of Daniel Lynch in 2024, was fastball reliant. You were going to throw the fastball a lot, and you were going to throw the changeup, and you're going to throw the knuckle curve. Those are all pitches that are going to be your go-tos. The slider was there as well. The sinker was there, but they just weren't being thrown at the rate of his fastball or his changeup. I mean, 2023, he was fastball, he was changeup, and he did not really throw his sinker. He did throw his slider, but not as much as he did in 2024. And then I was able to look at these numbers in late 2024 and a stretch that he threw 20 2/3 scoreless innings. He had 24 strikeouts, I believe it was, walked only 6. He was phenomenal. And I did get some pushback of, It's great to see those numbers, but was never used in the postseason, and that certainly was a letdown. I look at it in the way of the Royals bullpen was fine in the postseason. I think whether Daniel Lynch pitched or not, the Royals weren't going to beat the New York Yankees. I mean, you're talking about Daniel Lynch instead of Michael Lorenzen in one of those spots, or Daniel Lynch instead of Serpa or instead of Long. But Serpa and Long had been guys that were pretty much pitching in every single postseason game. And Daniel Lynch, I think, was more so left there if a starter was not able to go deep into the game, as was Brady Singer and as was Michael Lorenzen. But what was intriguing about these numbers that I did a little bit of a deep dive into was the usage of all of his pitches. I wasn't too blown away by the spin rate. The spin rate had improved from 2023, but a lot of those spin rates were still either around league average or slightly below the league average. What I was interested by was that Daniel Lynch became more of a slider pitcher. He still threw his fastball, and don't get me wrong, he throws that fastball a good bit. But the slider usage and the sinker usage went up. And that is something to take note at, because the numbers opponents had against his slider and against his sinker were not good at all. I think against the slider, hitters were batting around 133, and against the sinker, they were hitting 100. I think they were 2 for 20 against the sinker when he decided to go to it. And what's a little bit more special about, I think it was the slider, he threw it, I think, pretty evenly between lefties and righties. The sinker was far more of a pitch against, I think it was right-handed batters, if I'm not mistaken. So that changeup usage, which is changeup, was still utilized, just not as much. It got a little bit more efficient because batters were having to worry about different pitches in different spots. And of course, he did an excellent job of hitting, where the glove was. He was keeping the ball down, and he was able to become a very valuable piece to that bullpen in 2024. And I think it is directly correlated into the usage of those pitches. I think that's a little bit of a nod to him. And I think that's a nod to the Royals pitching staff, their coaching staff, Brian Sweeney, Zach Bove, guys in the minor leagues as well that are able to work with a guy like Daniel Lynch. You look at the numbers at some of the pitches and you say, okay, your fastball is fine, but if that's what guys are going to hit off it, and this is what you're throwing, and this is what the spin rate is, we don't want that to be a pitch you're throwing 50% of the time or 48% of the time. And now those numbers have dropped a little bit because there was more of a trust. There's a confidence in the slider, in the sinker. He's even thrown a cutter a few times against right-handed batters. I think he threw it like 3 times in that 2024 season. But still, it's another pitch to have to worry about. And I think there is this debate in baseball of what is better to have, one really good pitch or 5 to 6 average pitches that you got to think about. I think it is basically a back and forth based on what the pitcher is. If a guy throws 103 like Mason Miller, I mean, I'm fine with the fastball being his pitch. I would still want another pitch or two to worry about, but still, when you got a pitch like that, one pitch is better than 6 pitches for a guy like him. For Daniel Lynch, I think his slider is his best pitch, but the fact that there's these other pitches to worry about, it puts him in a favorable spot if he can really locate some of those great pitches, which with the slider, he was able to locate it well. And the whiff percentage went way up on the slider. You go back to 2023, it was under 30%. You go to 2024, he had a whiff percentage of 50 on that slider. So that was really a good strikeout pitch for him, and especially in the month of September. That allowed the fastball to be a little bit more productive, to be a pitch that he could rely on, that he could use to get ahead in the count, where back when he was struggling, the fastball was incredibly hittable. The changeup was easy to spit on because he didn't have the best command of the other pitches. But in September, he really had a sharp command of all four of those pitches that he really went to. And there's a couple of good highlights out there. I put them out there on Twitter. You can follow me at Johnny J _15, where the fastball slash sinker is well located at the bottom of the zone, pretty much an unhittable spot of the zone. The slider at times running up to 89 miles an hour. You locate it well. That's tough to square up, and the numbers would show that. Even the changeup from time to time against right-handed hitters was set up nicely by the other pitches. And that's what I think led to this revival of his career, of having that fastball and changeup usage go down and the sinker and slider usage go up a little bit. And now I think he absolutely is a lock for 2025. I don't think you need to worry about a guy taking Daniel Lynch's spot as long as he stays healthy in spring training and stays healthy this offseason. I would love for Daniel Lynch to be on the opening day roster and pitching out of that bullpen. It'd be even better if, a uptick in velocity happens. It won't surprise me if he's just building to throw out of the bullpen. And then you start to dream a little bit of, man, what if you got Daniel Lynch throwing 96, 97 from the left side? And don't think it's impossible. What if I would have told you at the end of 2023 that Angel Serpa would be throwing 98, 99 in the postseason? It can happen. When you're just focused on throwing out of the bullpen, which happened with Serpa, because Serpa still started a little bit in 2023, you're allowed to cut loose a little bit more. Now, for Daniel Lynch, I'd rather just generate the soft contact, have the better command, but man, if you can get him ramping it up a little bit, you might have a really solid piece in that bullpen for 2025. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I got another free agent bat that I want to talk about and a potential target for the Kansas City Royals. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ _15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And I gave you a little bit of a bet for Game 1 of the World Series, and now I'll go for the Yankees side of things. I'm not sure exactly what the odds are at this moment, but I would expect Giancarlo Stanton to have an RBI in Game 1. He has been one of the hottest hitters in the postseason. He has absolutely been the Yankees' best hitter in the postseason. I like him to drive in a run in Game 1, so I'll sprinkle down a little bit of money on Stanton to drive in a run in Game 1 of the World Series, but I'm going to do so over at FanDuel. So this is going to be a long off season. We all know that. And sometimes when we have segments, they could be repeat segments. We revisit them a month or two later. And it wouldn't surprise me if there is a potential segment like this down the road where we maybe revisit this exact same player and what they could bring to the Royals lineup. Because we know going into 2025, that's going to be the focus for this team, is bolstering this lineup, getting a little bit more pop in the middle of the order, getting guys that can get on base. And the first episode we did on this, the first segment we did on this, was more so about a top of the order bat, or at least an outfielder. I had a list of 5 or 6 outfielders. That remained the same in Mailbag Friday when asked about which guys make the most sense. But I thought for a free agent target today, I'm going to go against that. I'm going to go against the grain, and maybe the Royals don't bring in an outfielder, or they don't bring in a third baseman. A guy that I think would make a lot of sense to solve the Royals' middle of the lineup issues and also on base issues is none other than Christian Walker. Christian Walker has been phenomenal for Arizona over the last 3 years. And in fact, I would say the majority of his time in Arizona, which was 8 years there, 6 of those years, he was an above average hitter in the OPS plus department. Last year, he was 121, or I guess a couple months ago, he was 121. I can't refer to that as last year till at least the season's over. In 2023, 122. In 2022, 125. He hit 26 home runs in 2024. He drove in 103 in 2023 with 33 bombs. He had 36 home runs in 2022. And you look at the on-base numbers in his major league career, which spans 10 years, though you can kind of rule out Baltimore. He played back there in 14 and 15 and then didn't play in 2016 and then really took off with Arizona. But with Arizona, his OBP has been 331 over those 8 years. This past year was 335. It was his highest total since 2019, in which he had a 348 OBP. So I look at a guy like Christian Walker and say, you know, how do you fit him into this lineup? How does it make sense, right? Because he is a first baseman. Okay, he is a guy who is a first baseman and also a two-time Gold Glover. So he can hold his own over there. He had a 2.6 WAR this year. He played in 130 games. Arizona was good basically the entire year, just didn't sneak into the postseason again. 3 straight years of an OPS over 800. That's elite, in my opinion. That's absolutely elite for what this Royals lineup can bring. And he's just been a steady hand over the course of the last 5 to 6 years. I think you know what you would be getting in Christian Walker. And you also factor in that he's going to be 34 by opening day. So you're not looking at a guy that's going to be breaking your back financially. He is somebody that could be taking on a 2-year deal. You could make that work anywhere from 10 to 15 million, in my opinion. And I don't think you have to wonder on what he's going to bring you. And he's an unrestricted free agent, so there's no player option he needs to decline where he might be a possibility. He's going to be out there. And the Royals could absolutely look to bring him in and be that, you know, plug and play spot at the number 5 hole, right? Or the number 6 hole. To me, this is a guy that can absolutely transform the middle part of your lineup. Mainly because you say, okay, you got, let's say, a new leadoff hitter. We'll dive into that in another episode down the road of more options for that. But Bobby Wood Jr. in the 2 hole, Vinny in the 3 hole. You'd have Salvi in the 4 hole, and then a guy like Christian Walker who can drive in 100 and hit anywhere from 25 to 30 home runs. I think that's a no-brainer if you're looking to add some pop in the meat of your order. And it doesn't need to be an outfielder, right? It can be a guy that plays first base and is a DH. It would be easy to put Christian Walker in this lineup. You could have them rotate Vinny Pasquantino and Christian Walker between first base and DH. On days where Freddie Fermin's going to catch, okay, well, then you might need to be a little bit more creative if you want to keep Salvi and Vinny and Christian Walker in the lineup, because all 3 of those guys can't be in if Freddie Fermin's going to play. So maybe that's less time for Freddie Fermin to be in the lineup for 2025. But that's a bat that I think absolutely fits the mold of what the Royals would be looking for the middle of their order. You know, I brought up Tyler O'Neill, and Tyler O'Neill will be an option I think the Royals look at, but Tyler O'Neill is coming off of one of the better seasons, probably the second best season of his career. He might be a little bit more expensive. He's younger than Christian Walker. There's also that concern of he strikes out a lot, right? He is somebody that can absolutely cause problems for your lineup by not putting the ball in play, and the Royals value putting the ball in play. Now, Christian Walker struck out 133 times in 479 plate appearances, or at bats, excuse me. He had 552 plate appearances. So there is a reason to be concerned there, but still it's the OBP numbers that I go back to. I think if you had a 251 season, 335 OBP, and an 803 OPS, 26 bombs, and 84 RBIs from your 5 hole, their DH spot, I mean, guys, the Royals finished the year with Yuli Gurriel as their DH/first baseman. You know, I think this would be a tremendous upgrade, and considering what they had at DH last year, which was Nelson Velasquez to begin the year, this is absolutely an upgrade, and I think an affordable upgrade for the Royals. So I like that idea of Christian Walker being entertained by the Royals front office, and who knows, maybe he is on their board. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He had a 1-year, $10.9 million deal last year. So you talk about a number that will be around that. I think you could get it anywhere from 10 to 12. I said 10 to 15 earlier. I think 10 to 12 would make a lot of sense, and probably on a 2-year deal if you're going to bring him into Kansas City. So Christian Walker, I think a guy that could absolutely provide some pop to this lineup and would make a lot of sense for the middle of the order. We'll take our final break of the show. When we come back, Jack Caglione did go viral a little bit last night for a home run he hit in the Arizona Fall League. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor in PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the best way to get on the action in sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And PrizePicks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So go out there and download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup over at PrizePicks. The numbers overall aren't going to jump off the page for Jack Caglione in the Arizona Fall League. I thought it was a good opportunity for him to go down there, get a little extra reps before the offseason completely hits for everybody else. Royals minor league system, professional level. It's good to get some of those final at-bats and take some momentum into the offseason. And Jack Caglione and the Royals know how important 2025 is. Because when you look at first-round picks for the Royals, we know the history. We know that other than Bobby Witt Jr., and maybe if you want to, throw a bone to Brady Singer for what he was able to do this year, first-round picks for the Royals have not had the easiest transition. You've got some of those haunting names that keep you up late at night. And with the way the Royals, in my opinion, got screwed by the lottery, just by odds, right? Because they lost 106 games and they picked outside the top 3. That was a tough pill to swallow. But Jack Caglione falls to them. And Jack Caglione was definitely, to me, a boom or bust prospect. I think that Jack Caglione either becomes a tremendous major league player, maybe not the level of Bobby Witt Jr., of course, because Bobby Witt Jr. is a 5-tool guy. I don't believe Jack Caglione is a 5-tool guy. But we've heard what the scouts have said. And the scouts were high on Jack Caglione. The raw potential there is freakish, right? The size, the swing, the power. He can throw 99 off the mound, though he's going to be a hitter, in my opinion. But I say boom or bust because of the swing and miss in his swing. And I look at a guy and I say, hey, even if he does strike out 30% of the time in his major league career, I could see 30 to 40 home run potential all the time. And that's a perfect 4-hole, 5-hole, 3-hole hitter, wherever you'd want to place him. And he can play first base. He could play the outfield. The possibilities are endless there because I also think he's freakishly athletic. He's built well. I mean, he is a great prospect to have. But I will say that he needs to have time to develop. And I think when the Royals took him, there was a guy that might have had an easier transition to professional ball, which was J.J. Weatherholt. I thought J.J. Weatherholt would have been a very nice pick by the Royals. He goes to the Cardinals. But the prospect, the name, the upside was always in favor, in my opinion, of Jack Caglione. But when I say boom or bust, I mean, there is a chance, as happens in baseball, as happens with prospects, that he just never figures it out, that there's too much of a hole in the swing, and the Royals whiffed on it. But back to that point of 2025 and it being a big year, the Royals need another guy to have that seamless transition from high A to double A to triple A. Bobby Witt Jr. basically had that. He took a little bit of time after he was drafted, went down to Surprise, actually, and just had some at-bats and tried to get a little bit comfortable. And there still was that worry early on of, oh, no, he's not tearing up that pitching. And then once he got into a full season in 2021, after the COVID year, because that threw a little bit of a wrench in there, he started to show that, okay, he is this superstar player. The Royals need another guy to transform like that you have a top 10 pick. And baseball would usually tell you you can't miss on first-round picks 9 out of 10 times. And the Royals have missed on a lot of first-round picks. Jack Caglione, in my opinion, can't be one of those guys. He's got to be a big-time prospect. He's got to be a guy that when you call him up, he is going to make an impact in that lineup. You're not going to slowly bring him along and he's playing every other day. When Jack Caglianone's up in Kansas City, he will be up there for a reason, to improve and make a major impact in that lineup. The same way the Royals did it with Bobby Witt Jr., where when he came up, he was hitting high in the order. He was playing third base. I mean, he was there to be one of, if not the best player on the team. Jack Caglianone will not be better than Bobby Witt Jr. whenever he's called up, but he can be the second or third or maybe the fourth best player on that team. And that's why the Royals need to make sure everything is rounded out before they call him up. It would be awesome for him to be up in 2025, but there's no need to rush him when you've already have an option at first base in Vinny Pasquantino. But last night, the reason he went viral, the reason we're talking about this in a segment, was that he crushed a home run off a left-handed arm who threw the ball 95 miles an hour. And Jack Caglianone took it the opposite field, left center field, and hit it 110 miles an hour. That alone, and by the way, he had, I think, 3 other balls that had exit velocities north of 99 miles an hour. So he was scorching the ball. Yes, you got to factor in Arizona a little bit. Some of those numbers are going to be inflated. But you look at the makeup of the kid. He can hit the ball hard. He can hit the ball really far. He had a 500-foot home run in college, though it was with an aluminum bat. Still, that's a trait you look at and you say, if we round out that swing, that type of potential is already there, right? When you've got a power hitter like this and they can hit the ball 110 miles an hour the other way and over the wall, I might add. It's one thing to hit one into the gap at 110, 113. Bobby Witt Jr.'s done it. But for Jack Caglianone, I think that's a big part of his game that will tell us a lot about him as a prospect. It will be an issue to me if every home run next year for him is just dead pull to right field, because it's a minor league level, right? If you can hit to all fields and all fields with power, that's what makes you a boom type of prospect, where you take a guy, you like the tools he has, and for the Royals, they love the power. They love the athleticism that he can showcase over at first base. But that's a part, to me, looking at a hitting tool where you go to the next level. If you're somebody that can crush college pitching and high A pitching, and you're just hitting everything to the right side, well, guess what? When you get to the big league level, they're going to go inside on you time and time and again, or they're going to throw it down in the way where you're trying to pull the ball and you'll roll it over to second base. But if you can hit and hit for power to the other way, that's when it becomes a much bigger impact for your lineup, right? And there's not many Royals hitters that can hit the other way with power, right? Salvador Perez can. Vinny Pasquantino doesn't really. When he gets into one, it's usually to right center field or to right field. Bobby Witt Jr., most of his home runs, left center, center field. He's hit some to right center field, but he's usually a center to left type of hitter. You look at Hunter Renfroe. He has got into a couple to the right side. MJ Melendez, not really hitting them the other way. You can dream about Jack Caglianone being somebody that can hit and hit with power to all fields. And that, to me, will tell us a lot about him as a prospect. And last night, look, it's one swing, and the numbers really aren't there yet. But that's something I can take, bottle up, and go, if you have a couple more of those in the Arizona Fall League, I really am excited for what might be in store for 2025. Because if you're hitting home runs, not just wall scrapers, right, to left center and left field, you're hitting at 110 miles an hour the other way. That's impressive on a ball you're pulling. If you hit one to right field 110, you got all of it. You hit it the other way, that's a different level there. That's a freakish talent that you do have. And I think Jack Caglianone is a freakish talent. I'm looking forward to a lot more videos, a lot more clips like that from him in the Arizona Fall League in 2025. All right, that's going to do it for us for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every aspect of the playoff picture. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow, we might take another look into another pitcher and how we thought they fared in 2024. And I do have a stat on James McArthur that might make you feel a little better about him. But that'll all be coming up tomorrow in another edition of Locked On Royals. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.